apply that to our own lives. So let's read that. Let's see. Dave, why don't we start with you? If you'll read
2 Peter 1, 2 to 11.
Yeah. So y'all follow along and listen to these characteristics, because these things, to me, as I read through them, are extremely challenging, and I want to grow. I want to grow in these things that we have here.
Grace and peace be yours in abundance through the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Through these, He has given us His very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason,
Here's our list right here.
For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness. And unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election. For if you do these things, you will never stumble, and you will receive a rich welcome into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Okay, so when I read through this, I want the end result of knowing God, being effective and productive in His calling on me. I want to be effective and productive in His calling, and I want to confirm His calling and eventually have a rich welcome, not even just a welcome, a rich welcome into the eternal kingdom. So that, you could say, that is my goal. That's my personal goal. And a part of getting there is for those things we just listed, is to be a part of our life. That's why we're studying about Daniel. Some other reasons later about Daniel, but this right now, this is why we're studying this, so that we can put these things into our life. But a prerequisite to even getting on the road is found in 1 Peter 5, 6 through 9. Matrix, do you want to read that for us? 1 Peter 5, 6 through 9. And so one way that this works is that as we're studying this together, as you see these things that you personally need to grow in, and you engage God, you say, I need that. I want that. What does it take for me to have that? Well, first of all, you have to be a believer. If you're a believer, if you put your trust in Christ, then you have everything you need already to become that. So it's a matter of applying faith to that area and following through. That's what Daniel did. But if we're going to start this process, this is what we figured out about Daniel, is that this foundational trait of humility, that's the bedrock, one of the bedrock ways we can describe Daniel. So, Matrix, if you'll just read that section for us.
Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time He may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on Him, because He cares for you. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world.
So as you desire to grow in these things, be sure of this. There's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight. That's why it says resist the devil. And you could add resist the flesh. Resist those that are coming at you, in a sense, in the power of the devil, or appealing to your flesh. And we'll see that. We'll see those things even today. One more list. We have one more list before we dig into this. And this list is about Daniel, and it's from this chapter. This is another. We have a bunch of descriptions of Daniel as we've gone through this book. So here's another one, is Daniel 6:3. And we're going to cover this verse in a minute. But Daniel 6:3, just as a little reminder of what Daniel is like. Logan, if you'll read that for us.
Yes. Now Daniel so distinguished himself amongst the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom.
So Daniel had these exceptional qualities that the king noticed. One is simply excellence. That everything that was worth doing well. And that seemed to be his thing. Even the small things that seemed not to matter, he did everything in excellence. Now, a few other things about Daniel. Do y'all remember, what are some other things about Daniel that you remember about him? We've covered all those lists in Peter. We've covered the humility. What else stood out? Do y'all remember things that stood out about Daniel so far? You can participate from over there, Mike.
It may have been, when you say humility, that may be partially covered in that.
It's all right.
His just utter reliance on God.
Yeah. I would say that's a good description of humility. Yeah, he definitely, that was an attribute that he had. Anything else? Loyal. That's a pretty cool trait. And if people described me, I definitely would want to be known as loyal, wouldn't you? Loyal friend, loyal son, loyal father, loyal husband, just a,
Discipline.
Yeah, discipline. That was one of the ones I had written down too, is the discipline was a great contributor to his excellence. He had discipline. Self-control. Anything else stand out? In the negative sense, they mentioned a few things. Like things that, well, first it said he was trustworthy. That he could be trusted. And he was also some things he did not. He was not corrupt and he was not negligent. So those things, obviously, if you looked at it, you would know that from his positive things, but it particularly, that's just quote says that, he was faithful and he was trustworthy and he was not negligent and he was not corrupt. And there's always these comparisons in the background in Daniel, it seems like. These comparisons of Daniel to all the other administrators. There was corruptness. There was negligence in the way they carried out their duties. In Daniel, there was not. And we see that over and over throughout this. Another thing that shows up is that, and this may have been one of the verses you were talking about, Dave, or when we were talking over there, is that he was faithful, and faithfulness in a few things results in opportunities to honor God and bless others. So Daniel was faithful, and he was giving more things, and that those more things were not just an opportunity for him to fulfill his wishes and desires and ambition. It was an opportunity for him to bless others with the things that were given to him. And I think that was the parable at the end of Matthew you're talking about, where the owner of the land, the ranch, or whatever it was, left, and he had given them money to invest. Was that the one? And the ones that invested the money were given more, that functioned and were successful, and what they were given more responsibility. And so that seemed to happen to Daniel. As he was faithful in his responsibilities, he was given more. His territory increased. And so as a believer, when you are blessed because of your faithfulness, that purpose of that is so you can bless others. So that's kind of a principle. So now historically, that's sort of an orientation of hopefully of where you would take that information we just talked about. And you could cite a couple of points and you can see kind of where you are, what you need to grow in. And you should be paying attention to that and engaging God over it. Like if I need more discipline, if I need to be more faithful, if I need to be more consistent, if I need to have more faith, if I need to just have goodness. That goodness, you think of goodness is like the goodness of Jesus, that kind of goodness. And unless you struggle with that, so then God can let that be fruit in your life. So that's orienting yourself spiritually. Now, as we orient ourselves more kind of historically and biblically, the year is 539 BC is where we are here. Now, Belshazzar was our last king. Remember, the partier. He was kind of he was an extreme example of he refused to do what was right. He squandered what God gave him, and it was taken from him. Do you remember that in the parable? Yeah, that what was given him, he just buried it. Remember, and that even was taken from him. So that is sort of a principle. And Belshazzar was an example of that. So, but here we are, 539 BC. So this is at the end. This is towards the end of the 70 year where the Jews are going to be out of the land for 70 years, captivity, and then they're going to return to the land. So where we are is, if you look at other books, is Ezra. The book of Ezra opens up at about this same time. They were at the same. He was around at the same time as Daniel. If you look at 1st and 2nd Chronicles, just to kind of see where you are in the Bible, 1st and 2nd Chronicles is written right after they returned to the land, and Ezra wrote that to encourage. It's a history, and because if you read 1st and 2nd Kings and then you read 1st and 2nd Chronicles, you go, it just covers the same territory. What was the reason for that? Well, it's from a different reason, a different purpose, and you can see that in how it's written. So Ezekiel is another prophet of about the same time period, and I'd have to check on the others. Haggai, I think so. We're approaching the end of the Old Testament. Is where we are. We're approaching what we call the 400 years of silence, from the last book written in Malachi, written in the Old Testament, until Matthew is written. So that we're approaching that time period. Now, it's not that God was silent during that time, or we can't look at history and see what was happening with the Jews and all that, but the Bible, in a sense, is silent for those years. So where we are here is the Persians and the Medes, which their cultures were so similar. They were neighbors, and they kind of did things together in a sense. So they conquered Babylon together. Now eventually it's like the Persians sort of swallowed up the Medes, and it became just Persia became the empire. But at this point it's the Medes and the Persians, and so it's likely that we have our King Darius, who was given reign over Babylon. He was most likely a Mede that was just given that responsibility, or either, I hope you all follow me here, Darius and Cyrus are the same person, just the title. You have something there, Mike?
I was just going to say, more likely that he's not.
That what?
They say he was appointed.
Yeah. I think that is the thing, but there's kind of an open door because of historically and some of the ways it's worded. But I agree with you. I think it's more likely he's a Mede that was appointed to this job, and that he was under King Cyrus. King Cyrus was the Persian king, and so he's the one that got credit for conquering Babylon and all that. So maybe y'all don't care about that, but it helps you understand to know the history just of what's going on. So the Lion's Den, which is our next narrative, I'm going to say story, but you have to understand this is a real event, and it affected history, okay? Because it was the Lion's Den probably happened about a year into King Cyrus or even King Darius's reign. It was about a year into the new regime when the Lion's Den happened. And during that year, Daniel had had a relationship with both Darius and Cyrus, the kings. And he was trusted by them and respected by them, and he cared about them. So I keep blocking myself out with the cup. What's that?
It was an early block.
Okay.
It was like your hands.
So Most likely, it was the lion's den that endeared Daniel, particularly to Darius and Cyrus. It's probably, which is recorded, that's not recorded, but the results of it are recorded in Ezra chapter 1. And Cyrus is going to send, is probably Daniel read in Jeremiah, which was written about 100 years before. It was prophesied that Cyrus would be the king that would bring Israel back to the land. This is called the first regathering of Israel. The second regathering of Israel happened in 1948. The first regathering was right here. And so they're going to stay in the land until probably 70 AD. We have quite a few years here before they get scattered again. And it's most likely that Daniel read from Jeremiah to Cyrus. They were close. Read to him that he was the man prophesied by the prophet Jeremiah. And Cyrus followed through on that willingly. He wanted to do it. Which is crazy, but he sent the Jews back to Israel. First with Ezra to rebuild the temple, and then Nehemiah to rebuild the wall. So this helps you, I think, as you read through, understanding the latter part of the Old Testament a little bit better. So this event of the lion's den changed the history and the trajectory of Israel. It changed even Persia and the empires that followed. So this is a historical, real event, is what happened to Daniel in the lion's den. And the response to it reverberated all the way up until this day, today, where we're going to be impacted by Daniel in the lion's den, which is like, I don't know, it's kind of impacting to me to know a little bit of the history of it. So let's go. I think now another thing just to orient you to is that after chapter 6, the book of Daniel changes a little bit. It was kind of stories of Daniel's life. So that's going to end. There's still a few events of his life that he's going to share, but mostly it's going to be about future events. That we'll get into that starting next week. It'll help us understand end times. It'll help us understand the book of Revelation way better when we understand Daniel. So it seems that Daniel's responsibilities, like let's say after that conversation with Darius, after Cyrus sent the Jews back to Israel or started the process of doing that, it seems like Daniel's public responsibilities changed what? He was an old man when he got thrown in the lion's den. He was in his 80s. So he's still, as you see our title there, the old man's still getting it done. He's still changing the world. He's in his 80s, and God's still using him to impact kings and impact the greatest empires in the world because of his humility and his faithfulness, basically. So let's start off with what's going to happen here in chapter 6, and we'll see how Daniel is still getting it done. Who's next? Is that you?
Yeah.
It's 6, 1 through 3.
Okay. It pleased Darius to appoint 128 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom.
You know, this is really something. Daniel was a leader in the previous. Now, what would normally be done, and I thought about this with Daniel was offered all these robes and stuff by Belshazzar. I'm thinking, if it was a movie, I'd be saying, don't take it, Daniel. They're going to know you're a leader, and they're going to wipe you out with everybody else when they come in. Well, for whatever reason, they did not kill Daniel. Belshazzar died that night, and most of his entourage died that night, but Daniel did not. And we're going to see Daniel, in that length of time there, in this year or so, the king grew to respect Daniel and gave him more and more responsibility. And remember, not only is from this other regime, he's like a captive that came here almost 70 years ago. It's like he's from the wrong people group to be leading. He's not from the right people group. But the king recognizes his qualities, and he is leading. The king, we're going to see, the king can be fooled. He has some discernment, but we're going to see in a minute. The king can be fooled. He's going to be fooled. But still, he knew excellence, he knew good character, and trustworthiness when he saw it. And that's what he saw in Daniel. And that's why Daniel had that position. And the intangible thing, now Nebuchadnezzar, the original king, Nebuchadnezzar saw it clearly in Daniel. And the way Nebuchadnezzar worded that intangible thing was, Nebuchadnezzar would say, the spirit of the gods resides in Daniel. In other words, he saw the power of the Holy Spirit in his life. And he saw something's up with this guy. This is real. This guy's real. And so, even Darius and Cyrus are going to see the same thing. Now, they're going to name it and call it different things, but they're going to see the same thing. That's what they see in him. All right, so now, like I said, he's from the wrong people group. He's, people get jealous and ambitious, and they develop evil intent. This is a common trait. And let's see what happens here with Daniel, verses 4 and 5.
At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God."
So, they were looking for something in Daniel, looking for anything. Something personal, a personal failing, fault. Sounds like politics, doesn't it? They were looking for a business failing, something he did wrong in business. But Daniel was faithful in all these things. And kind of like, we won't go there, but in 1 Timothy 3, talking about the character, the qualifications of an elder, one is that the elder is to be above reproach. Well, Daniel, and what that means in the sense of the Greek, there's no handles on him. There's nothing to grab and say, this guy does this. And so there were no handles on Daniel. There was nothing they could grab and say, he does this. Daniel humbly did the right thing regardless of circumstances or pressure. He just faithfully did the right thing over and over and over. And this way of Daniel doing things and getting credit for it it hurt their personal ambition, probably hurt their pocketbooks. They didn't get promoted to the highest position, but still they could not find a legitimate weakness. And so, since they couldn't find a weakness, listen to this. They attacked his strength. What was his strength? Daniel was more loyal to his God even than to his king. That was a strength, and that's what they were going to use. They had figured that out. All right. They had a devious plan brewing. Verses 6 to 9.
What chapter are we in?
Chapter 6. You should at least ask that with some shame.
I have the wrong outline.
Do you?
Yeah, I always have the one from last week. It's like, I'm not following along.
Do you guys have this week's outline? The rest of you? Here.
Thank you.
Not that you really use it that much.
Okay, chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing, so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing.
That saying always cracks me up a little bit. In all the worldly empires of, "O King, may you live forever." And I think about the Narnia Chronicles of a horse and his boy, and they address that in the book because there's all these kingdoms and kings, and he goes, "Why should I?" He said, aren't you supposed to say, live forever, king? And the answer is, why should I tell him to live forever? I don't want him to live forever. Even if I said it, he's not going to live forever. So it's like, it doesn't make sense, but it was a way of, like, you could say honor or buttering up the king, that they would say this. Now, Darius had some insight. He had some discernment, but he didn't have all the behind the scenes information. And they had lied to him. So they had said, all of them agreed to this plan. Well, they may have all agreed but one. And Daniel hadn't been told about it, and he didn't agree to it. So they lied to the king. But even though they lied to the king, they covered themselves when they told him, King, you know when you sign this into law, that then it can't be changed. You remember that. We just want to remind you of that. This can't be changed once you sign it. And so they were covered, they kind of were covering themselves if they got caught. They were going to get caught, but they were trying to cover themselves. And they also did this kind of standard but effective fare. You know this technique, right? Appeal to the flesh. They were appealing to the flesh of the king, and he fell into the trap. We know that started in the garden, right? The serpent appealed to the flesh of Eve. That was the technique. And that's what goes on. That goes on. You should recognize this in your own life, in your own temptations of people who want to, especially, it's happened in religious circles especially. I remember I was really young. I was probably 19. And I was starting to do some kind of ministry stuff. I was working with the youth. I was still a youth, but I was working with the youth. And I remember the pastor who was trying to manipulate me and was trying to, he was kind of trying to use me. And the thing that opened my eyes to it, when he was saying, look, Steve, listen, if you do this, we'll set you up a little office here. We'll put your name on the door. And it just struck me. What are you doing here? Like, he didn't know me well. There's other parts of my flesh he could have appealed to, but he was trying to appeal to the part of my flesh that wasn't even tempting to me, really, of promoting me in that sense. But what he was doing was appealing to my flesh, and that is a method of Satan, and it's used in religious circles just as much as used in the world.
Yeah.
So it runs rampant of how we get tempted into stuff. And so we always have to ask, what is the appeal here? What's going on? What's happening in my life?
Happens every time.
His leg, his plugs was keeping hitting his thing. I'm like, okay, what you got to look at your leg, honey?
You're too strapping.
The satrap. I can't.
I think it's good.
You gotta lower it a little bit.
Thanks.
Okay. We got it straightened out for a couple seconds. Here, so there's an alertness to us. These things, remember the attack of the enemy. It's a favorite attack of the enemy to appeal. What is the weakness of your flesh? What are you drawn to? Well, that's what's going to be used against you to keep you from developing these characteristics that we looked at in 2 Peter. Because if you develop those characteristics, you're going to be effective in the kingdom. And the enemy does not want you. He wants you to be ineffective in the kingdom. He can't steal your salvation, but he can steal your effectiveness and your productiveness. And one way he does it is by keeping you away from these characteristics of living like Daniel lived. Take one guy, one teenage boy living for God and not falling for the tricks, and look at the impact he made. It goes for all of us. The impact we will make if we will grow in these things, and one of the off-ramps of growing is falling to the fleshly temptations of the appeal that are going to be made to us as we follow down the calling that God has on us. All right. 6:10. Daniel was faithful.
Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went to his upstairs room where the window was open towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before.
This is not some pagan ritual of opening the windows and looking towards Jerusalem, but Solomon did this when he first built the temple 400 years earlier. He said, it was done, spoken in the power of the Holy Spirit, of saying, pray, he's reminding them that this is where God's presence resides in a special way in this temple. Look to this area, look to the presence of God, symbolically looking towards the temple, and pray and fall on your knees and pray before God. And so that was kind of a Jewish tradition. And it could be just a religious thing, but it was done in sincerity. And Daniel was doing it in sincerity, where he was remembering his homeland. By the way, Daniel, taken from his homeland at 14, loved Jerusalem, never went back. Never went back. That we have recorded. So he would throw open the curtains, open the window, and he would kneel down on the floor in his room and pray, facing Jerusalem. And everybody knew he did this. He wasn't something he wasn't being bold just for the sake of boldness. This is what his practice. As busy as he was with all the responsibilities he had in the palace, and even though those people didn't follow his God, he would say, got to go pray. 3 times a day, he would leave and he'd go pray, spend time with God. And people knew that. And so that is what they were going to use against him. And even though when they made this proclamation, you can only pray to the king, he wasn't being bold just for the sake of boldness. It's what he had always been doing. But he didn't hide. He didn't hide in his closet. He went and he boldly prayed. And they knew. And then it's like the same thing was that he had, in a sense, trained Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego in this same thing, is that they were bold. And everybody else was horizontal on the ground. Before the statue, remember, they were vertical. They didn't fall down. It was obvious. They were bold. And remember, their prayer was, our God can protect us, but even if he doesn't, we're still going to do what's right, and we're not going to bow down. Or I think of Elijah, who James tells us about Elijah, who was he says, everybody knows he's the great prophet, but James said, no, he's a regular guy. He's just like us. He has the Spirit of God living in him. He's just like us. And he prayed boldly that it would not rain, and it didn't rain. So he's telling us there, this thing, you learn this thing about prayer and obedience, is that, okay, let's say somebody is sick. We want them to get well, and we hesitate to pray so boldly for what if they don't get well? That's not our responsibility. It's our responsibility to pray boldly. So we'll pray boldly that, just for example, that God would heal you. And if God doesn't, that's God's business. That's not my business. So I'm going to pray boldly. We pray boldly for God to move and to act. He tells us to do that. We do that. But whether God does this or not, I'm still going to do the right thing. I'm going to do what's right, because God sees the whole picture. I just see this one little piece of it. So I will boldly pray, and boldly obey what he calls us to. That's the example here. So now, when they grab Daniel and they start dragging him out of the room, he knows where he's going. Okay? He's going to the lion's den. That is a hole in the ground where he's going to be dropped into there with wild, the meanest of the mean, hungry lions. This is how they eat. They get people that have crossed the king or whoever, they get dropped in there and they eat them up. And so that's where he's at. So if you can be sure, if Daniel is human, there's a little bit of fear and dread going on here, that he's sweating it. But it's not, do you feel some fear and dread? It's how do you respond to this? How do you respond to the fear? How do you respond to the dread of this thing that's about to happen, this thing that's coming, and you don't want to deal with it? You don't want to face it. Well, you choose bold prayer over. You choose bold prayer and faith over fear and anxiousness. I'm sure there was fear, but there's also a bold and faithful response to that fear. So we're not asking you, the Bible is not asking you to have no fear and no dread, but it's saying, choose faith, choose boldness, do not give in to it. Do not be controlled by it. So we're cutting Daniel some slack if he broke out in a little sweat, if he had some terrible butterflies in his stomach. But he still calmly went to what he was being called to. So, verses 11 and 12. Is that where we are?
Chapter 6.
Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed.
Nanny, nanny, boo, boo. We caught somebody praying. It's like human nature doesn't change much from preschool to the greatest halls of power. It's the same human nature. And I'm sure if you follow politics at all, you've seen it. You see it all over the world. This same sort of attitude and way of doing things. It's human nature. And faith says it doesn't matter. And the faith of Daniel said it doesn't matter what forces of evil, humans or demonic, or circumstances that are plotting against me, I will trust and obey. I will follow through. So no matter if it's satanic attack that's going to be like overwhelming powerful, human attack, just jealousy, hatred, circumstances which just can go crazy on you sometimes, that Daniel's saying, well, in spite of all those things, and even the dread that I feel in my stomach right now, I still will trust and obey. And I'm going to follow through and trust God all the way through to the end. That was Daniel's response. So, the king realized he'd been fooled. But, as they had already set the groundwork for, they thought they had the king. They thought they did. Where you got to follow through, king, because you know it's the law. The king can't change the law that the king made. We got to follow through. All right, verses 13 to 16.
Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, paid no attention to you, O king, for the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is law of the Medes, that Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve, continually deliver you.
So, this showed, in a sense, the king's true affection for Daniel and the hope that he had, not because of his hope in God, but the hope that he had because of Daniel's hope in God. It's like he was piggybacking on Daniel's hope, on Daniel's faith. In other words, saying like, may the God that you hope in deliver you from this. I'm the king, and I can't do anything. I want to help you. I respect you. I love you. And it's like the king didn't sleep all night long because of his concern for Daniel. And so they had this hole in the ground where they kept almost like a cave where they kept the lions for these events. They remove the stone, they drop the old man in, cover the thing, and then it's sort of insult to injury. The king has to put his signet ring on there because it's to make sure it's not, nobody goes and messes with the stone. They wax it, he puts his signet ring on it, and they throw him in alone. Guy's in his 80s. It's dark. I'm sure it didn't smell too good in there. It's rumblings and roars of lions, which up close is going to be a whole lot different than what you watched on the big screen. It's maybe their bristly hair, they're brushing up against you. You feel their hot breath on your legs. It's like, but he wasn't alone. God was with him. Just like God was with the three guys in the fiery ordeal, God was with Daniel in the hole with the lions. So let's read on, find out what happened here. Once again, it's like this, that should just stand out to you, that in the depths of the trial, God's man was not alone. He was not alone. Verses 23 to 28. Or did we read 17, 22?
No. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring with the ring of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel and exclaimed with a voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continuously, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, May the king live forever. My God sent his angels, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, Your Majesty.
Don't you just like the way the king addresses Daniel? The God whom you continuously serve. It's like the pagan king is like putting his hope in God because Daniel put his hope in God. Who is this guy? And they've already identified he doesn't belong here because he's this guy. He's one of the exiles. You know, that's how they identified him. One of the exiles. He doesn't measure up to us. He's not one of us. He shouldn't even be in power. But here the king is not looking at all that. The king is looking at his character and how he has lived. And this is going to influence the king. It seems like there's a possibility that another king has put his trust in God because of the faithfulness of Daniel. Let's read on. 23. You always get the long ones, Brooke. 23 to 28.
I know, when I was reading, I kind of ran ahead while you were speaking, and something crazy happens. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. That was the crazy part. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and people of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His domination will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions, so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus.
So God did get the glory. Daniel, in all of his faith, Daniel somehow pulled this off. Where obviously we look at Daniel and we look at his example, but God got the glory in this whole thing. Now I'll remind you, this is a narrative. In other words, it's true. It's a story. It's true, but it's just telling what happened. It's not saying that the king's response was right. It gave no judgment on if the king should have done what he did. Now we could add in there and we could guess if he should have done something different, but the king, he's in a sense is brand new at all this stuff. And he just responded as a king responds. You guys lied, you're wrong, you tried to kill my best friend, you guys are in trouble. And you're fat. So, well, it's not saying that that's the right thing to do. That's not what it's saying. And the Old Testament is like that. It gives a story. Now, and you can easily go, well, that was wrong. Well, yeah, it was wrong. It didn't say it was right. It just told, the Bible is very honest. It's like, this is the way it happened. And you can judge for yourself with the rest of the Bible what was right and wrong. Use your common sense. And so I know a lot of people who've read through it and they say, well, look at what they did. Look what they did. And I said, the Bible didn't say that was right. That's just what happened. It's a history. And so, and even his attempt, you could say this is an attempt at legislating Christianity when he said everybody must worship God. We know from history this doesn't work. England legislated Christian. Everybody must worship Jesus. I mean, it never works to force religion and to have a state religion. So that's if people will interpret, say, conservatives are saying that about our country, but that's not the right thing. We don't have a state religion. We don't want a state religion. As soon as you do that, you've messed everything up. Now, at some point, we may touch back on this. What was the attitude of the founding fathers of this country? One of the attitudes was, if we're going to have freedom, we need morality, like a Christian morality. People cannot have freedom if they just go crazy and do whatever they want to do, personally. But you can't force that. So that the founding fathers of the United States understood that principle, and they tried to work it in to the founding documents, but they talked about God, they talked about Christianity, but they never tried to make a state religion. And that's a big mistake if that is ever done. That's not my point here, but just thought I'd throw that in. Because it does kind of stand out and how the king was doing things. But either way, is that God received the glory from this, and we see the impact on one man loving God, obeying God, living for him, and bearing fruit of it. He didn't just claim it. But people that were completely apart from God looked at Daniel, saw his life, and they saw something different, and it impacted them. Some it impacted to the point of attacking him, and some it impacted to the point of them following God. And that is the same thing that happens when we live like that. It goes the same way. But we're still called to follow through and live it out no matter the outcome, no matter what's going on. Circumstances, pressure, temptation.